Phase 5 of the MCU is an interesting one, being the first to end in the middle of the year, with Ironheart being the official final entry and then Fantastic Four kicking off Phase 6 just weeks later. It's also maybe the most uneven phase in terms of quality, with some incredible but also some terrible projects. In this video, I'll be ranking, based on my own personal opinion in terms of the quality, the MCU's 5th phase, including movies, TV, in both live action and animation, all in one list. Make sure to subscribe, become a member of this channel for early access to videos, and let's begin. The one and only project that I'm excluding from this list because it's just not comparable as a project to the rest is I Am Groot Season 2, because while there are TV shows on this list and even animated ones, I simply cannot compare an animated shorts TV show to the rest, especially since over the course of these 5 episodes there's maybe 10 or 11 minutes of total screen time. I Am Groot are obviously cute, enjoyable little adventures, but not a serious entry of this list, which means that this list will be 14 entries long. And I think there's a pretty clear last place. Secret Invasion is the Thor Love and Thunder of Phase 5, just the standout worst thing that Marvel has ever produced, and I kind of struggle to take it seriously as a legitimate entry in the canon of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The series takes a story from the comics and strips away what makes it interesting. It should have been an Avengers movie, not a Nick Fury TV show. The writing is mostly fine for the first 5 episodes, but basically nothing of note ever happens until the finale, in which the writing takes a nosedive off a cliff, likely the worst episode Marvel has ever produced. Secret Invasion ruins multiple characters, like unceremoniously killing off Maria Hill right away, making Rhodey a Skrull since who knows when, making Gaia a universe-breaking powerhouse, and making Nick Fury retroactively look useless, even all the way up until this point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was looking promising, but the finale turned what could have been something okay into easily Marvel's worst TV show. I rather enjoyed the first season of What If. In fact, I think it came with a masterpiece episode or two, and I love the concept. Tell me why exactly it was the worst episode of that season that they decided should be the tonal template for season 3, and even made a sequel episode to the worst episode of season 1. To be honest, by season 3, What If simply forgot its concept. The season deviated from the idea of what if something in a Marvel movie happened a bit differently, to simply creating new, entirely unrelated concepts, and boy do they know how to pick them. The concepts just get sillier and sillier, the characters given focus get less and less interesting, and of course, we gotta get back to Captain Carter because this anthology series doesn't have enough recurring characters. There are things about What If that I never liked, like I think the art style has always been a bit off, and even in its best season, most episodes were too fast-paced, which really did not mesh well with the MCU style humor. It got so aggravating. But now we don't even have the interesting concepts, or worse, they are actively stupid ones. It's a sad ending to what I think could have been a fantastic idea for a TV show, one that kind of could just last forever. Echo has gotta be Marvel's most forgettable show, and honestly for good reason. It exemplifies a lot wrong with the way Marvel approached TV in the multiverse saga, because it was just 5 episodes long, making it only a little bit longer than a movie, and then focusing on a character that's never even really had her own comic, let alone deserving of an entire TV show. The writing in the series is mediocre, the action is fine but forgettable, Kingpin is definitely not at his best, and yet again, the finale falls under its own weight, exemplified visually by Echo's terrible new outfit. The show makes no sense. Echo simply should have just been a supporting character in Daredevil Born Again. The Marvels has its merits, like a unique plot device that can be entertaining, as well as some cool action, but it also just feels a bit off. Despite the fact that this movie is an entry in the cosmic side of Marvel, I don't think it's very interesting visually, nor does it really focus on interesting characters. Carol has never had any personality, which is such a shame. Monica was probably the single worst part of WandaVision, especially by the end, and that leaves only Kamala to carry the movie on her back as easily the most interesting and most entertaining character, but she is not enough, especially since she's not the main character. Then there's Nick Fury, whose appearance feels disconnected from his appearance in Secret Invasion, like a different character, speaking to the MCU's weakening interconnectivity because these two things came out months apart, but Nick Fury feels like two distinct human beings in the two of them. Ultimately, this movie probably would have never been to my liking, but they also clearly had a vision for it. One that included it being a Disney princess style musical that they edited out almost in its entirety so as to not upset fans. I think honestly Obviously, it being a musical definitely would have upset some hardcore fans, but it also would have made a lot more of a cohesive film and a more unique Marvel experience. I don't know, maybe that would have drawn in other Disney fans or something. Maybe they would have appreciated it. As it stands, I think that would have been better than what we got, which is forgettable and a bit of a mess, if a bit enjoyable at times. While Secret Invasion was easily the biggest TV disappointment of the phase, I think the biggest movie disappointment was the one that kicked the phase off, and the one that would have held the phase up on its back if it succeeded: Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, back when Kang was still meant to be the saga's big bad. This movie made some glaring mistakes. They got rid of Luis, which feels like a way of getting rid of the style of the first two Ant-Man movies, recast Cassie with, I think, a worse actress, gave the Wasp a terrible haircut that is legitimately distracting, and also minimalized her role to the point where it's unusual she's in the title, gave Team Ant-Man ugly new suits, and set the movie entirely in the quantum realm. That last thing didn't need to be a terrible idea. The quantum realm looked pretty fantastic in previous appearances, but somehow, despite this movie's massive budget, everything looked terrible. It's something out of a far lower budget and even older movie. It's frankly embarrassing the way this movie looks. The writing is mostly mediocre, the plot isn't anything special, the quantum realm is undercooked, and Kang, well, okay, the movie at least has a pretty great villain. If you forget that he was meant to be the big bad of the saga, and you had the big bad of the saga lose to Ant-Man in this movie. Now that that idea has been cancelled, retroactively that does make Kang a better one-off villain. But aside from a great villain, and also Scott himself being entertaining as always, this movie is certainly a disappointing one. Captain America: Brave New World has its merits. I like the tone quite a bit. The flying action scenes are admittedly really cool, and I like how this movie connects to multiple older projects. That said, the movie is stupid. Why do we need to have another project of Sam trying to prove himself to be the new Captain America without the serum, just like Falcon and the Winter Soldier? To be honest, now that they've tried twice already to prove it to me, I no longer think he is. Like, legitimately, at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I was willing to accept it, but now they've convinced me otherwise. I think he needs the serum, and I think Bucky would have been better. Then there's a question of why the Hulk doesn't appear in this Hulk movie, and why did they spoil the third act reveal in all of the marketing? I do think Sam and the new Falcon have a good dynamic, but I just don't think Sam Wilson was ever really equipped to be the main character of an entire movie franchise, and I don't think he was the best choice for Captain America. I'm kind of mixed on Ironheart. I think generally speaking there are things to certainly dislike. For instance, the show speaks to the general idea of Marvel just giving a series to anyone. Ironheart wasn't the most successful comic book character launch, and people didn't really respond to her in Wakanda Forever, so why give her her own show? I also think that the supporting cast isn't great. Natalie is fun, and Riri's mother is pretty great, but like Xavier's a pretty empty character, and Riri's heist teammates are genuinely some of the worst characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is difficult to sit through their scenes. That said, I think the hate for this show was completely blown out of proportion. I like the general idea of it trying to be a bit original and having its protagonist do bad things and ending up morally gray. I like the idea of the show mixing tech and magic into its story. I thought that the pacing of the story was decent. The mystery behind the hood was intriguing and had a satisfying payoff. The Ironheart suit looks pretty great, as did the action scenes and CGI, and I felt like the show really embraced the comic book goofiness with its villains. Generally speaking, the main villain was pretty good. The writing isn't always the best, and I think Riri started off the season being a bit unlikable, and to be honest, I'm probably never gonna watch this again, but I'd be lying if I said it was difficult to sit through, and I'd be lying if I said it was the worst thing that Marvel ever made. It's being review bombed, it's being blown out of proportion how bad this is, because I think that there are way worse things out there, even in Phase 5. A bit of a smaller disappointment on the TV side of things is Daredevil Born Again. Disappointing not because it's bad, but rather because it pales in comparison to the Netflix show, which just so happens to be my single favorite comic book show of all time. Season 3 in particular, I believe to be a complete masterpiece. Daredevil Born Again, meanwhile, was misguided from the get-go, initially conceived as a reboot rather than a follow-up, before being reworked into a sequel, but at that point the damage was done. This does feel like a sequel to Daredevil, but something is always off. There's a different, I think, think way less interesting aesthetic. The action is never quite on the original series level, which was groundbreaking. The mostly newly introduced supporting cast kind of all just suck, and you could feel how the season was reworked midway through. Basically, the season is the equivalent to, I think, the weakest Daredevil comic run, which is to say that all things considered, it's still pretty good because Daredevil has never really had a bad comic run. Held up by the strengths of Charlie Cox's Daredevil and Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, alongside a solid plot and solid action. This would be considered the worst season of Daredevil, but the best season of a lot of other TV shows. On the exact opposite end of TV shows, while I was excited for Daredevil Born Again only to be a bit disappointed, I was not excited at all, I was not interested at all in Agatha All Along, but was pleasantly surprised. It's a show that going in felt like it shouldn't even exist, but by the end morphed into something very, very interesting. Agatha herself is a very entertaining character and also interesting in being a non-heroic protagonist, while the plot of going from trial to trial in the Witch's Road was a simple but effective one that I kind of never got tired of, mostly because of the underlying mystery of the identity of Teen, which greatly enhanced the mystery component of the series. The series did get a bit campy at times with the writing and performances, but honestly that fit the vibe and general concept of the show really well. Even if that's not exactly entirely to my taste, I do think this is one of Marvel's better entries into other genres that no other Marvel project tried. I liked this series way more than I expected, but I also didn't expect to like it at all. This one might be a bit controversial, and honestly, I considered putting it even lower. Deadpool and Wolverine is definitely an extremely entertaining and really funny movie with some emotional weight, and clearly a lot of fan service. I'm somehow still not sick of Deadpool's antics. I still find it very entertaining. Seeing him and Wolverine together is great, as is Wolverine in his costume, finally. However, even while sitting in the movie theater watching this movie, there were moments where my mind found itself thinking, the plot of this movie is terrible, and this movie is also really ugly. Because, honestly, yeah, the plot makes no sense, only really existing to place our characters together and interacting with the multiverse. And then the primary setting of this movie, the Void, is, well, void of visual flair. Weird because it looked great in Loki. It doesn't ruin the movie, it still entirely succeeds at what it's trying to do. It's still extremely entertaining, but if I'm being honest, I felt like the first two Deadpools struck way better balances between the comedy and the plot, making this easily my least favorite of the Deadpool movies. I didn't really have to think about it. Even going out of the theater, this was my least favorite. However, it is the second best Wolverine movie, even if it's nowhere near the first place. One show you might be surprised to learn is officially a part of Phase 5 is Your Spectacular Spider-Man, which is surprising since it's set entirely in a different universe, and X-Men 97, also produced by Marvel Studios, is not an official part of any phase. Anyway, I had a love-hate relationship with this series. I loved its original concept of filling in the gaps of MCU Spidey, telling his origin leading into Civil War in Spider-Man freshman year, but because of how creatively limiting that was, they pivoted to being a different universe, which felt less interesting to me. The trailers then revealed an art style I really didn't like, and writing that seemed off to me. Going into the show, I expected to hate it, and honestly, I didn't like the first two episodes. Peter was unlikable, the art style was ugly, something was off. It turns out that was simply a weak start. The series just got better and better. I think Peter simply had an ugly suit because once he switched it out, the show looked better and better to me, maybe also because I got used to the art style and even began to appreciate what it was going for. Meanwhile, the series surprised me as it focused on its best characters, the action was pretty good, there are brutal moments, twists and turns, and ultimately, it felt quintessentially Spider-Man, becoming, I think, the best Spider-Man cartoon since Spectacular, which ended 16 years ago. So now I am excited for season 2. Thunderbolt is a pretty special movie. The writing, the pacing, the music, and the action are all pretty top tier, bringing together characters from, I think, far worse projects and making them a lot more compelling as individuals and as a group. Elena quickly becomes maybe the most compelling female character in the MCU, definitely surpassing her sister, while the others are used in their own strengths and to cultivate a strong team dynamic, despite the fact that in terms of diversity of their powers and even their design, lines, there isn't really much. It doesn't look like it should be a good team dynamic. This all centers around Bob, the Sentry, and the Void, who are used expertly to cultivate the movie's plot, character dynamics, character development, emotional stakes, and even, in the end, he's a pretty terrifying villain. Thunderbolts coming after Captain America Brave New World makes for a stark contrast, because while one movie soured me on its protagonist and the MCU going forward, the other got me really invested in a lot of characters I didn't really care for much beforehand, while getting me hyped for what's to come. It is such a shame that this movie didn't do well at the box office, because it really deserved to. Also, special shout out to the music. I think it's one of the best MCU soundtracks. Speaking of, easily the best television entry in Phase 5 is Loki Season 2, which builds upon the already great first season, only to improve it, in my opinion. Already, the first season had incredible performances, one of, if not maybe the best soundtracks in the MCU, great visuals and world building, all of which I think is carried over to this season. Season 2, however, adds additional compelling characters, somehow masterfully pulls off a time loop plot, enhances the emotional stakes, and concludes beautifully. More than anything, I think Loki as a show carried the multiverse saga on its back. Loki single-handedly built up the threat of Kang, making his threat terrifying before that was weakened by Quantumania. Loki laid the groundwork for the visual style, the musical cues, the story, and the backstory of what easily could have been a fantastic saga and fantastic big bad. Honestly, whenever anyone talked about how the multiverse saga felt disconnected and it felt like it wasn't leading to anything, I kind of didn't really understand where they were coming from because of this show. It felt like this show was the only thing you really needed. You could go from Loki Season 1 to Season 2 straight to the King Dynasty, and that's enough. Unfortunately, through no fault of its own, that plan didn't come to fruition, but that doesn't change what this series accomplished. It's great. It's a fantastic show, and this season, I think, is actually the better of the two. Man, there's something so special about the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Volume 3 builds off of the first two Guardians movies, one special and then two Avengers movies, to give us a perfect send-off to these incredible characters, with the trilogy's signature, incredible, masterful blend of hilarity with emotional stakes, edginess and earnestness, and comic book insanity with grounded realism. The focus on Rocket definitely made for the best possible story. His backstory is heartbreaking, his creator is the most hateable villain in MCU history, and the way that James Gunn made me cheer for Rocket calling himself his comic book name, Rocket Raccoon, was nothing more than a stroke of genius. This movie gave me a type of closure for this franchise and James Gunn's time over at Marvel that I'm satisfied with. I could honestly never see these characters again, or even this part of the world again, and honestly I think that's very impressive to take a beloved film franchise, make an incredible movie, but also make it so that it's such a satisfying ending that I'm fine with never seeing more of it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is without a doubt the best movie in Phase 5 and the Multiverse Saga, and up there as one of the best in MCU history.